Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to HitScan. Killjoy has been in a game almost a month now, and it's still very much a mixed bag when it comes to how people perceive her. She is incredibly strong with some bits of her utility, but outside of her effective use, she can't really bring that much to the table. I'm thinking of her on attack, for example. It isn't as good as her on defense. But this week is the first time that we've ever seen her played by pros. So I wanted to look at how popular she is, where she's been used, where she's having impact, and ultimately how the pros are playing her and the meta that's forming around her to an extent. But before we get straight into it, quick PSA from Miska.
Just before we get started though, a word from our sponsor Frontier, who have just announced a bunch of new games, 5 of them actually, and there's one that we've already played a few months ago that Ryan and I really enjoyed, so check out Lemnis Gate here, and then we have 4 more games at the end of this video as well. This was one of the best maps. I love this map. Play versus another player and you're kind of stuck in a time loop. So you play your round and then afterwards the enemy take their turn and it sort of stacks on top of your round.
Yeah, and like the main thing is to pick up the orbs that you see in the trailer and take them back to your like base, I suppose it would be.
Yeah, you play your turn, you rewind, and the whole thing plays out again and you try to beat your opponent. It's pretty great.
It was really good fun.
Coming early 2021. Wishlist now on Steam. Link to Lemnis Gate wishlist will be in the description. Now let's get back to the video. We'll check out some more trailers at the end of this whole video.
Let's start with a bigger question. How popular is she? And where is she popular to? There is a common theory that I hear across like coaches and a general audience saying that she's only really good on Ascent, everywhere else she just isn't as viable. And looking at the stats for NA and EU, granted these tournaments are still ongoing, by the way you should definitely go watch them because they're both pretty awesome, the level clash in EU and pop flash in NA. These tournaments are still ongoing, but the pick rates of Killjoy are actually pretty good. Breaking it down like this table, we can have a look at her pick rate across NA and EU. For Ascent, she's picked 40% of the time. For EU, it's 61%. So yeah, she is certainly more popular on Ascent than any of the other maps, but her pick rate on stuff like Haven and Split is also pretty decent. For NA, it's 25%, she's picked a quarter of the time. EU, it's a little bit higher, but not by much, but it's still impressive considering she's just come out. For Split, it's a lot lower in NA, but granted, NA haven't been played Split all that much in comparison to EU, and EU, she is used a third of the time. Bind is the only map that you really don't see her used all that much. Generally, because it's so execute and retake heavy, Killjoy isn't going to provide that much use in those kind of scenarios. But to give context to this, Killjoy has a better pick rate than Breach, Brimstone, Reyna, and Viper, and she's more popular than Phoenix in EU because obviously she's very popular in NA, so that's going to be a little bit higher. Another common question that comes out is, if you add Killjoy to a composition, who do you replace? Because somebody needs to go if you want to add a Killjoy into your lineup. And the answer for the most part is Sage, which is a weird one because a lot of people would say that Sage is the most overpowered agent in the game. The pro seed doesn't really suggest that, but granted that is a very different style of play than we're certainly going to be used to in rank. Before we talk about how impactful Killjoy can be on Split and Haven, let's look at the map that she is the best at. Let's look at Ascent and how some of the pro teams have been using her, and also really explaining how this meta is forming out, because this meta is just based on intel and providing constant pressure from the attacking side, but certainly on maps like Ascent. If you're from a Counter-Strike background, this will make a lot of sense. Because you come out of spawn at the same time as the attacking and defending teams, you have to run to take that space. It's not like Valorant. Putting pressure in certain areas of the maps is incredibly important because you need to contest those areas and most importantly not let the other team take those areas away from you. And because Ascent is the most Counter-Strike-esque map in the game, I'd say, you see this an awful lot, certainly on attack, and this is an area that Killjoy is quite good at. Because of the way that Ascent is set up, you want to make sure that the defending team is rotating as late as possible because the rotation times from getting to A to B or vice versa are quite long. So what you'll see from teams on the attack and what we're seeing here from Mitch and the rest of C9 is trying to put a little bit of pressure on both B and A at the same time, even though one of the sites has more attackers there than the other. It's also good to have that utility there, such as the Killjoy's turret as we're seeing, to make sure that the defenders don't poke their head a bit too aggressively, spot out that there's nobody there, and then tell the rest of the team that B is clear, it's likely going to be A. So having this utility just to catch them doing that or to make them a bit scared to do so is going to keep those defenders glued to the site, which is the whole point. That's the attacking team's win condition, and that's where Killjoy can have a lot of effect. Mitch has his turret further into B main to watch that choke. The defenders don't know if there's more people there. It keeps pressure on them to stay on the site and not rotate away just in case. And the defenders can't push it because the turret will catch him out and there could potentially be players there. We actually see this quite a lot where we see players pushing out expected to see a Cypher camera or a turret, just a bit of utility, nothing too scary, but instead running into a player and dying because they weren't expecting it. Those kind of plays is basically the bread and butter of what makes Ascent. And throughout the rounds, you'll see Mitch moving the turret into various different positions, delaying it for a while, for example, and just generally finding nice, cute places to put it to make sure that the defending team really can't get comfortable knowing that their site isn't the one that's going to be hit. When I said about the turret bait to round 4 is another example of that. Mitch knows that his turret's likely to be destroyed by the Silver, so he puts down an alarm bot alongside, so the Silver destroys the turret, it's no problem, and they can still have some insurance, I suppose, that nobody's going to push it, and if they do, they'll know about it. But other than that, it was a fairly quiet attacking round for Mitch. Straightforward stuff, there's not really too much to say about the Killjoy in attack because she's so defensive orientated, but I did want to highlight a relatively bad lockdown. It was bad because it's easy to know the position of this ultimate. The Killjoy placing down lockdown here tells the Omen that that's where the Killjoy is. The paranoia comes out, hits perfectly, it's an easy frag and nobody's there to trade and protect the ultimate, so it easily gets killed. That's the one thing you need to be careful about if you're using lockdown, that it's very easy to tell where it's been placed because of the radius around it. So if you or your teammates aren't really protecting it all that much, it's just going to be a big waste for the most part. But let's talk about the defense. There were 7 rounds in total as C9 won out this game against Dignitas, and Mitch got 13 kills, and you can see how it all comes together. Let's talk about the defensive setup on Ascent actually. A is the more common one. You have this really annoying turret placement that not only watches the A main crossover, but also watches anybody that's pushing in short. This is also really good because you now have a bit of a meta where Jets will now dash through this choke, because that's usually where a Cypher will put a tripwire. Of course, a Jet dashing for a tripwire instantly breaks it, no problem, so it's more a way to just make sure that that utility from the Cypher is cleared out. When it comes up against the Killjoy, it doesn't really work, and there's a few examples of that where Mitch can get an easy frag onto the Dignitas Jet. The alarm bot is set up in A short, and this is where, yet again, the meta across the game has changed quite a lot. Certainly when you look at the fact that Cypher is picked 100% of the time, every time, it feels. It used to be the case that, for example, on Bind, you would put tripwires here as a Cypher, right? It's fairly common stuff. The issue is, it's very easy for the attacking team to just poke their head into hookah, destroy your tripwires, and you're not going to find too much effective use to them. If you use really common tripwire angles, it's very easy for the attacking team to either break them with guns or to use utility like shock darts in order to break them. So what you see now with Cyphers and now with Killjoys is utility being played a bit more conservatively, a bit further back, and in the example with this alarm bot, it is set up in a shot because if the attacking team get to this point where they trigger it, they're not just going to rotate and turn around. They're very much going to be dedicated to hitting to the A site, so regardless of if it gets detonated or broken, the attacking team is full dedicating to that site. So that's why you'll see a lot of Cyphers, going back to the Bind example, putting their tripwires here. If the attacking team breaks it or trips it at this point, they're never going to rotate around to A unless things go terribly wrong for some reason. In fact, if you draw a line through the minimap when it comes to the utility and placement of the agents, you can pretty much see the line that is drawn in the sand for the defending team to make sure that they have full control. The tripwires on mid, again, it's super deep onto mid to the point that if an attacker trips over it, they can't really back out very easily. And you can pretty much assume that they're going to be there for quite some time and you could rotate accordingly. That is very much meta right now, and that comes from the Cypher Killjoy combination. It's being augmented, and things like that are going to become much more important, so be aware of it. It wins you games, it has done for me at least. And from here on out, Mitch is full control of the site, and it's super awkward for Dignitas to push on it in various occasions. In fact, there's multiple examples that I'm going to run in the background of this just going the way of Cloud9 with a simple hold. And the setup is so strong, if you actually go to round 16, Mitch is just holding A main and A short pretty much on his own. He doesn't really need all that much help. And even better, this is the prime example of how strong Killjoy could be on this site especially, is that C9, whilst they're on an eco holding onto classics, hold off against a full buy of Dignitas and win a round with some really nice utility and the ultimate being used. It's pretty much perfect. Like, when it comes to an example on how good Killjoy can be and what the game is going to look like in the future with her addition, this is a clear indication. But I do think the main thing is that throughout these rounds, Killjoy herself didn't look all that strong. She has impact in the right areas, sure, but it's not like Mitch was exploiting an overpowered agent here. He was just using utility in the right way, and a lot of teams, certainly from the EU side, have told me they weren't expected to run into this amount of Killjoy, and not a lot of teams were able to practice up against it, so they just got countered hard. So now when the anti-strategy comes in on how to play against the Killjoy on Ascent, for example, there's going to be a development and an evolution on how that plays out. But the fact that Killjoy is having this impact in the right areas, I think is a good sign, because Killjoy's not been played all of the time. She's not fully broken at she's 100% pick rate, she's just useful in the right areas, but she can be exploited and punished. Most certainly if the Killjoy is played in a very traditional, straightforward way. Like I said before about Cypher tripwise, if you put them in super common areas they can easily be broken, that is still very much the case when it comes to Killjoy too. In fact, when Brax played it against Envy in Haven, he did this a little bit, and it was easy for Envy to pretty much punish him for it. For example, he'd put his turret on this corner, put some nano swarms in the alarm bot in this choke on C long, and it's very easy to clear that out, because that's where Cyphers used to put their tripwires, and people got wise to that and started deleting them. So this is just an example of how teams have evolved around Cyphers tripwires, learned how to punish them. But yet Brax hasn't updated his playstyle on that, and a lot of his utility is broken seemingly for free. And when Killjoy doesn't have any utility, she provides nothing, really. But in regards to other like cute plays that these two teams had, I really like this one from round 5, where the defender team actually stacked all of their Cypher and Killjoy utility towards A, and then the majority of T1 pushed B aggressively. They still get a couple of frags, but because Envy know that the majority of players are on the B side, they try to rotate to A, and they have this big gauntlet of utility that they have to sort of clamber through, and they get punished because of it. It's a similar thing for round 12 actually, the last round of T1's defending half, where all of this utility makes it super awkward for Envy to push. It forces the Omen to use from the shadows to try and teleport to the other site because it was too much of a nightmare, but time ran out. It really forced a mistake. He could have done that a little bit earlier, but because of all that utility and the information overload, made it super difficult for Team Envy to play this. In any case, there's a lot of stuff to break down here, yet it's only just a sample size of how good Killjoy can be. For the first debut, I suppose, in a tournament, it was a much better showing here for Killjoy than it was for Reyna. And it's quite nice because I know a lot of people think that Killjoy can be super overpowered, certainly when it comes to the damage her Nanoswarm does. But it's nice to know that even if that gets nerfed, which I personally think it should be, she's still going to have impact in the right places. She still has an identity, she still has impact, and I think this was a pretty good showing for her. Not too strong, but impact in the right places that she should have strength. That's going to do it for this time. Thank you very much for watching, and to play us out, we're going to be looking at some of the new trailers from Frontier at Gamescom, and a little bit talking about Lemnis Gate. It's a game that me and Miska played a lot as, like he mentioned, and I think you're really going to like it, personally.
Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell if you haven't already. Now let's check out 4 more new games from Frontier that have just been announced. Don't forget to check out Lemnis Gate, and here are our reactions from all the trailers. So this is a turn-based strategy puzzle type shooter.
So you can focus on trying to pick up as many orbs as possible, to stopping your opponent from picking up orbs, to stop your opponent to stop you from picking up orbs. There's like a lot of things that you could be working on.
Yeah, you play your turn, you rewind, and the whole thing plays out again, and you try to beat your opponent. It's pretty great.
Okay, this is genuinely terrifying.
This reminds me a little bit of Happy Wheels.
It does, yeah, like Happy Wheels.
I can see why it's called Struggling.
Yeah, Planet Zoo is one of those games I am like, it's on my to-do list. As somebody that grew up playing a lot of these kind of games, you can pretty much design everything. It's not a case of, oh, just put in a store. You can like make that store look how you want. Like the level of customization is literally crazy in this game. It's ridiculous.
Oh man.
I'm still believing that we can win.
That's not too far away.
Oh, yeah, November 3rd. That's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Oh, see ya.
I didn't realize I had like a fear of like the unknown quantities of space until I played this game. The mass of it is just crazy.
Oh wow, this looks awesome. I love the suits, they're cool. The helmets are a little bit funky, but I really like it. Odyssey.
I'm gonna have to pick it up again, I think.